Jon Semancik is the Director of Marketing for Marvin Test Solutions. Jon is a Navy veteran with over 35 years of T&M experience, having held positions in engineering, marketing, and product management with Northrop Grumman, Westinghouse Electric, Texas Instruments, Daimler Chrysler, and Mtech. He holds a BS degree in electrical engineering from Penn College of Engineering and MBA from Weatherhead School of Management at Case Western Reserve University. Jon, please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and appreciate the time to be online with you today. Today we'll talk about the problem challenge to begin with. Essentially, it's high volume and high speed test of 5G devices in the millimeter wave arena. And we're talking frequencies currently up to in the 53 gigahertz range. And as we know, that just continues to expand as we move forward. Looking at the problem at hand, those involved in millimeter wave semiconductor test have developed and identified a number of areas in the packaging standpoint where the test is critical, and test speed and the need to support these ever higher frequency ranges contribute to the number of challenges we run into. As we know, 5G test in the sub 6 gigahertz range is significantly less complicated than what we're going to see with the millimeter wave devices, whether you're dealing with instrumentation, cabling, various interconnects, and so forth. But as we move into the millimeter wave test arena, many aspects become more complicated, and this impacts almost every area of the system test standpoint, including calibration. And if we just think about cabling, for example, when we're in the higher frequency ranges, just from a manufacturing standpoint, manufacturing multiple test sets, cable routing in different positions can actually impact the overall performance of the test system. Now, beamforming technology is key technology for millimeter wave devices, communication systems, which enables reliable and efficient communications in the millimeter wave band. And we heard a little bit about that previously. If you look at the antenna module, it's comprised of many built-in beamformer ICs and antenna elements. The beamformer ICs is a multi-port block that integrates the transmitter and receiver blocks into the RF front end that's connected to the multiple antennas. With the new modular approach, each front end module includes transmitter, power amp, the receiver low noise amp, and possible switching depending on the system itself. So the takeaway from this is the module has many ports, multiple frequency bands, and more functionality to come, so that there are many aspects from a test standpoint that we need to be concerned with and address accurately. So the basic interconnects and cabling are almost an afterthought again when we're dealing with lower frequency apps, but with millimeter wave frequencies, that there are many factors that contribute to the measurement error, and each of these need to be carefully considered and addressed as we're assembling the test system and taking these into account. For example, as we consider the measurement path from the VNA instrumentation to the device under test, we see the various interconnects, the associated connectors, the blind mate interfaces, and then the impact from the load board itself if it's not properly designed and manufactured. So in the production test environment, each of these contributes to the test system error budget, whether it's insertion loss, the signal reflections, repeatability, the blind mate interfaces. You know, maybe at lower frequencies, it's not that much of a challenge, but when you get up in the 44 gigahertz, 53 gigahertz range, we need to really be concerned with blind mate interconnects and all these in all the various other aspects of our test system. So if we take a quick look at the type of performance data that's expected from users when they're doing the testing and characterization of millimeter wave semiconductor devices, we can see several pop out right away. The performance tests shown are really no surprise when dealing with these types of devices, and they include insertion and return loss, variable gain amplifier performance across the entire operating range and span, and the power and gain phase performance. In some instances, manufacturers may also be concerned with characterizing the noise figure and understand the noise output of the receiver and the adjacent channel power ratio to understand the power contained at the specific channel relative to that overall carrier power. Now we can translate those requirements from the previous slide to the these performance requirements into the types of measurements and control signals that have to be supplied by our test system for these types of devices. As discussed earlier, the VNA is a key part of this, and from the standpoint of the test systems at Marvin Test Solutions, we partner with Keysight and we're leveraging the PXI version of their high performance VNAs. And this is to perform the S parameter measurements as well as the gain and phase measurements. Basic communications with the device under test typically occur using the SPI bus or I2C interface and are performed utilizing typically the dynamic digital I/O card with basic register reads and writes. And this is also a key part of powering up the devices as well, because we can use the parametric measurement unit on our dynamic digital cards to do pre-power on tests as well to ensure that we have all the connectivity in place. And the digital interface is also capable of performing additional functionality also. So if we take a quick look at why automated test is important in this environment, it's pretty straightforward, and everyone on the call understands this. But in a laboratory, it's the laboratory instrumentation manual setup. They're going to provide acceptable results, but we need to be concerned with a number of issues as we transition into our production test environment. And that includes long-term repeatability and the potential for damage from handling cable in removing and reconnecting. And another key thing from a production standpoint is obviously speed. Everyone's concerned about speed on a per device test standpoint, but also footprint when we're on the production floor. So here's a quick breakdown of the types of instrumentation that we would expect to see in my ATE system in the various purpose and then, additional characteristics regarding overall frequency ranges and so forth. Having an accurate, repeatable VNA instrument and having these accurate and repeatable measurements is definitely the heart of my millimeter wave test system. But we also need to ensure that we have precise power application and control of the device as well. And this is just a real quick breakdown. You can go through the slide at a later time and see this. But really, a key part of this also, as I mentioned, is having those pre-power contact tests to ensure that we have all the connections in place and also being able to communicate with the device clearly and easily. So some of the challenges associated with supporting millimeter wave test interfaces, including providing the device under test interface, is ensuring that it's compatible with different wafer probers, device handlers, as well as manual device insertion. So this can be met with an innovative mechanical design approach, but the key to production testing of millimeter wave devices is providing a test receiver interface that can deliver quality signals and be reliable, as well as providing the consistent, repeatable test results. That's a key thing as you move forward. So delivering these reliable and repeatable millimeter wave measurements, it requires careful attention to the RF transmission path. And this is from that source through the tester interface to the load board and terminating at the device under test socket itself. So specifically selection of the interface cables, the connectors, the load board parameters, this is all critical to these developing and ensuring that we have repeatable tests in this area. So the receiver interface implementation that we're looking at today supports the delivery of 20 VNA RF signals. And the way we do that is through a 2.92 millimeter wave SMK blind mate connectors to the device load board. With the general purpose pogo pin blocks providing the interface for our digital signals, the device under test power, and additional low frequency communications. And then the transmission from the blind mate connectors to the load board is accomplished via semi-rigid cables that connect the SMK mating connectors to the through-hole mini SMP RF connectors. And those are part of the load board assembly itself. So considerable time was spent designing the load board and simulating the performance. The load board was constructed consisting of a 10-layer PC board using Rogers 3003 laminate. It was utilized stitched signal in ground traces to guarantee our uniform trace impedances across the load board. And the simulation for this particular load board resulted in really great performance all the way up to 50 gigahertz. The design supports 4 devices, each with 5 ports. So you have that common port plus 4 transmit receive ports, and both manual and automated insertion via Epson NS8000 handler, as well as other compatibility with other handlers, is also provided with this particular design. Now, system level calibration is another critical aspect of any automated test system, and clearly mmWave is no exception. So the measurement path includes many sources of error, and we touched upon this a little bit earlier, but whether it's interconnects, our cabling, the blind mate, we almost be qualified to accurately isolate and measure the performance at the device under test, which is ultimately what we're trying to get to. Once the measurement path is characterized, the linear error can be removed from the test system to isolate the device under test. The most accurate approach in that adopted in these Genesis test systems that we're looking at involves a multi-step process to isolate the device under test. First, we calibrate the RF path to the device under test board using traditional methods. Then the 2 test coupons are used to characterize the device under test board path from the connector to the device itself, and then of course back to the connector. And then from this information, we can generate the touchstone data. This is then combined to provide the overall calibration solution and to accurately and, just as importantly, repeatedly characterize the signal path to and from the device under test itself. Now, just a little more on the calibration process before we move on. We need to ensure that we have accurate S parameter measurements, and that requires calibration to a reference plane. And again, just a little review from the last slide, but it's ideally located at the device under test. Using time domain gating and an automated fixture removement method, we were able to extract S parameters from the open fixture with the device under test actually removed from the socket. The initial calibration to the receiver interface was performed using calibration standards, and the extracted S parameters from the AFR measurements were then applied to move the measurement reference plane from the receiver interface to the device under test itself. So from the instrumentation all the way to the device under test. Now, the described test interface and the system was able to test multi-port mmWave production devices, both at 28 gigahertz, 49 or 39 gigahertz, and today up in the 53 gigahertz range. RF performance of the receiver and load board interface exhibited excellent S parameter characteristics over the entire range of frequencies with no dead spots, providing repeatable, reliable RF measurement performance to the device under test. And this judicious selection of RF connectors, just as importantly, and cables. We talked about cables, not just from the standpoint of being able to perform at the various high frequencies, but also from the standpoint of manufacturing the devices, so we're maintaining a very consistent signal routing from system to system, so you have very good repeatability. And you can see that in the various transmission and reflection measurements that you see on the slide right now. Now, this is just a real quick slide showing some of the measurement times that we were able to provide versus some of the other products that may be out there in the marketplace from a 5G standpoint. And the device under test summary shows you the various tests that are occurring for these test times. But you can see that the 5G tester, the TS900E 5G, shows the types of execution speeds that you see both for a single site and a dual site capability, as well as for 6 ports and 12 ports. And the approximately 13 to 14 second total test time really is leading performance in the industry today. And again, a lot of that has to do with being able to utilize multiple VNA instruments at the same time and effectively test in parallel, and being able to do that with up to 20 ports in the test system. So it gives you a lot of flexibility from a parallel port standpoint and being able to test the multiple devices. Now, if you happen to have an existing test system that needs to be upgraded to the higher test capabilities, we have what's called Mtech, and it's a series of a PXI-based solutions, and you can see how compact the solution is in that in the image you see here. But essentially, you can take and upgrade a test system that may not have 5G capabilities, millimeter wave 5G test capabilities, and you can easily incorporate this type of capabilities with the PXI VNA instrumentation in the higher performance digital I/O capabilities, simply by utilizing a very small complex addition to a number of different types of test systems. And this design both supports engineering and high volume production instrumentations, and it's ideal for extending the life cycle of legacy ATE test systems that may be out there in the marketplace today. So on that note, that is it for the formal presentation section. And Hongjun, I don't know if we have any questions, but we can go ahead and move on to that.
Thank you, John. Yeah, we do have quite a bit of questions online. I think let me start off. You have this table as test time comparison. Audience interesting to understand what is the key to achieve the high-speed test performance indicated in your comparison chart.
Yeah, there's no question that the key to achieving this is having the ability to have the multi-port VNA instrumentation and being able to put multiple instruments in a test system. So I mentioned we can test up to 20 ports. So we can install quite a few independent VNA instruments, giving us exceptional test efficiencies, but it also reduces the test time because we can do the parallel port testing. And that today is really the key to those test times, being able to perform that.
Okay. So another question, how do you plan to address the blind mate performance as the demand for higher frequency tests continue to grow?
Yeah, the blind mate interface is really a challenge for these types of testers. And we're working with a couple suppliers today to increase the frequency range. And today you can buy higher frequency blind mate connectors in the 60, 70 gigahertz range. But from a production standpoint, it's the repeatability of the connection as we make and break these connections over time. So what we're continuing to work for is with the suppliers is to be able to develop and deploy blind mate interconnects that have the repeatability and the robustness to work over and over in a production environment. But the key thing is these higher frequencies, because as I mentioned, they're available today, but you may only have a insertion removal specification of 100 100 repeats, or repeating that cycle 100 times, which in a production environment can be detrimental. So we're really pushing to get the higher performance blind mates at the higher frequencies.
We have a question regarding to the test coupon during the millimeter wave path loss calibration. I think this is probably a good opportunity for you guys, for you to dive into the calibration techniques again to answer these questions.
Okay, so the question was regarding the calibration process. So
the question is, how many sets of that do you pair with per characterized test coupon during the mmWave pass loss calibrations?
Today, it's for the way that the current load board's set up. We have the ability to put 4 devices under test into the load board itself, and then we're able to test utilizing being able to test from the interface to the load board to the device under test and characterize that portion of it for the coupon, and then the remainder of the calibration is just traditional calibration from the VNA to the load board interface itself.
Sorry, John, I think maybe I did not explain clearly. So I think the question is not about the count of the load board. It's really about the your calibration technique, because I think the folk asked the question is under the impression you have some type of test coupon needed for this calibration. But as my understanding, the AFR, you don't really need any kind of test coupon. Could you just elaborate that more?
I'm going to be quite honest, Hongjun. My associate is the expert on calibration, and I don't believe James Frame was able to jump on the call today. So I would have to actually respond back with an answer on that one. I apologize.
No problem.
Unless Jim is with us, which I don't believe so.
Okay. We have a very general question in terms of the PCB design. So to your experience, what is the acceptable insertion and return loss in PCB perspective when we go for 5G testing?
I don't have that exact number off the top of my head. I apologize.
Okay. So John, I think you showed your tester interact with the final test handler. So I assume this tester is also capable of wafer probing.
Also capable of what? I apologize.
The wafer probing.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Thank you again, John. Thanks for the excellent introduction of the tester platform.
I'd like to once again thank our sponsors who've made this event possible and made it available without registration charge to the attendees. Our premier sponsor, Cohu, our emeritus sponsor, Mtech, our honored sponsors, ISC, iWin, and TSE. Our distinguished sponsors, Backer Hotwatt, Innovative Circuit Engineering, JMT, Nidec SVTCL, R&D Altanova, UI Green, and lastly, our exhibitor sponsors, ELES, MJC, Phoenix Test Arrays, and Smith's Interconnect. So I'd like to thank all of them, and also give an extra special shout out to Cohu, who is our premier sponsor, and they are the market leader in test interface solutions for very challenging applications in different areas. And also would like to thank ISC, who's the global #1 total test solution provider with products in the elastomer socket and interposers, spring pin socket solutions, and burn-in socket solutions. So once again, I thank all the sponsors. I thank you as the attendees. We look forward to seeing you again tomorrow at 7 a.m. Pacific time. I wish everybody a great day, so thank you.